My name's Dr. Catherine Hughes from Crime Psych. I'm doing this particular video on a psychological autopsy because I watched a programme last night on Channel 4 called To Catch a Killer, and they did a perfect psychological autopsy, although that particular term wasn't used within the programme. So I thought I'd put together this video to tell you a little bit more about what psychological autopsy is. The term psychological autopsy is exactly what it sounds like. It's an autopsy of a deceased person's thoughts, feelings, behaviour patterns and actions leading up to their death to try to determine the cause of death. Sometimes it's not very clear whether death was caused by drug or alcohol abuse, or by suicide or accident, or even homicide. So in cases like that, psychological autopsies can prove very useful in piecing together information from the various sources. In order for a psychological autopsy to be done, a massive amount of information has got to be gathered from various sources and then put together so that inferences can be drawn. And this can be information, as I say, from various sources, such as their medical records, a person's medical records, what medications they're on, their lifestyle, their behaviours. It can be interviews with their friends or their family. You can use various pieces of information. Of course, we all have a digital footprint these days, and so masses of information can be gathered from that as well. A psychological autopsy can include any known stressors of the person who's deceased. It can also include information such as their marital or relationship status and their occupation and things like that. And once all of that information has been gathered, forensic psychologists can then begin to work through piecing together all of the information. A psychological autopsy isn't done very often, and that's mainly because it costs such a lot of money and such a lot of time to gather all of these pieces of information. But it can be a really useful investigation tool, especially when it's used alongside other policing and investigation methods. Psychological autopsies can be done on people such as suicide bombers. So investigators will go and interview friends and family and find out all of the information that they can about a particular person to try to understand the mindset of that person, what types of influences were in that person's life that led to them becoming a suicide bomber. Psychological autopsies can also be done on completed suicide cases. And again, interviews with friends, family, any journals that are kept will be gone through, any digital information which is available will be used, as well as obviously their medical records to look for any known mental illnesses before they passed away. A psychological autopsy amalgamates a mass of information and puts it all together into a neat summary of a person's life leading up to their death. Inferences have got to be drawn from the information which has been collected, and so then sometimes these psychological autopsies can be a little bit subjective. However, sometimes there's no other available information or any forensic clues about what was happening prior to that person's death, and in cases like that, the psychological autopsy can be of value. The programme that I watched last night was looking at the convicted murderer, Ben Field, and they were doing a psychological autopsy on Peter Farquhar. Now, fortunately, Peter kept very detailed journals which were able to help the police piece together information about his death. They also interviewed a number of family members and friends of Peter Farquhar. Had it not been for these detailed journals being kept, they would never have correctly recorded Peter Farquhar's death as being murder. A psychological autopsy on its own probably wouldn't be enough to solve a case. However, when this information is all gathered and put together, it can lead the investigation in other directions to gather more evidence. Because of this, psychological autopsy that was done, they were able to determine that Peter Farquhar wasn't the alcoholic that Ben Field had said that he was. His death was originally recorded as being because of excess consumption of alcohol. However, with the use of these journals, his background, his medical information, it all showed that Peter was concerned about his health for about a year leading up to his death, and that led to them conducting further investigations and eventually exhuming the body. Exhuming a body after it's been buried is a massive undertaking. It's obviously quite costly, but it's also really stressful for the family who've already put their loved one to rest. And so this is only really done as a last straw, as a final measure. They were able to determine that none of Peter Farquhar's friends or family thought of him as being the alcoholic that Ben Field had said that he was. And so when they exhumed his body, they were able to examine his stomach contents and determine that he didn't actually have enough alcohol in his system to kill him that night. In this particular case, the psychological autopsy was done really well. It did take a really long time because there's lots of information which needed to be gathered. But thankfully, because of that, justice was done and his death was correctly recorded as murder, and Ben Field was prosecuted and convicted. The psychological autopsy can be a really valuable tool in determining a person's thoughts, actions, behaviours and lifestyle factors leading up to their death. I hope you found this video interesting. I hope that you've learned something from it. Thanks for taking the time to watch. Bye for now.